Hello and welcome to the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. My name is Jackie Tomes, and on this show we are having open conversations about building a property business that creates not just cash flow but also freedom to be able to travel the world, from those that have been there and done it. So ourselves, from startup to over £17 million of deals done, £7 million of finance raised, and doing this whilst being able to go on holiday every 6 weeks. So on this show we have a full range of different topics, everything from the big picture strategy of how you do it, how you harness and maximize your own potential to make it all happen, and even right down to the practical solutions. And today is one of those practical solutions kind of a day. We are joined by Izak Oosthuizen from Zhero, and we're talking about how you make sure your IT infrastructure is set up in a way that enables you to travel the world. We've been working with Izak for a number of years now. He takes care of all of our IT behind the scenes, and we would not be able to travel the world like we do without that infrastructure in place. So super excited to welcome Izak to the show, an absolutely lovely, super knowledgeable fellow. So without further ado, here is myself and Izak talking about creating freedom with the right IT infrastructure. Hello, Izak.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to be here with you today doing this, having this conversation, really. You've been such an important person in terms of us and how we've set up our business to be able to work for us and to be able to travel. And I think people need to hear your wisdom and your insights. So we've been working together, I think, for 5 years, something like that, I think, Izak. And I kind of came to you saying, I've got a real IT headache. I've got all these people that I'm starting to work with. I've got this IT infrastructure. I'm trying to have a nice life and travel the world, but all this tech stuff keeps coming back to me, and I'm absolutely fed up with it. And that's where you have entered, and you are the owner of Zhero. That is Zhero, and you basically take this headache away from small business owners and deal with their IT infrastructure. That's probably the best way to introduce you. How do you feel about that?
Well, that sounds great. It's a semi-compliment also. Thank you very much. And it's obviously a great feedback to hear that we've taken some headache away. I think, yes, I think it was around 2019. And so, I mean, just going at the back of it is to reflect on, I guess, the situation from my point of view where you were is, I guess, where a lot of companies are finding themselves often is they're at a certain size. And I guess it's not an SME size, but it's more micro business. And the problem is that a lot of people might think, especially with the cloud, is that if you have a micro business or you are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 staff, that you actually do not need to be concerned about cybersecurity. And there's just a certain stage where, if I may say, the wheels almost will come off if you don't apply the basic rules. And I guess what we really focus on is trying to help you to save on your cybersecurity budget and use it for a holiday or traveling the world.
Well, that's going well for us. I think as well for me.
Thank you very much.
I think it's like you, because we're a remote team, right? And that's, we are all around the world, all trying to create this, this organization, and you need to have this kind of infrastructure set up, like how before working with you guys, like how all of our domains worked in terms of like the emails, how you're collaborating with calendars, your files, all of this stuff. Like it's you're doing your best to make it as professional as possible, but until you really get all of that set up, it's chaos, right? And we don't really want chaos. So I guess maybe tell us a bit more about from your perspective, like what sort of problems do you see people come to you with in terms of like getting that infrastructure working, and how do you help?
Yes, no, excellent. Thank you, Jackie. So I think the key thing is that there's a lot of misconceptions out there in the market, and we really. I'm also part of Cyber London, and it's a non-for-profit that's actually trying to help organizations to take out the hype in cybersecurity, because we're all confused. Everybody is running to, then it's dark web monitoring, or it's biometrics, or it's passwords, or it's an overemphasis on the wrong things, where we really focus on sticking to the very basics. The basics are normally not costing you a lot of money, but don't break the basic rules, whatever size you might be. And just reflecting again, is you were just, I believe, if I can remember correctly, reaching that mark of just below 10 staff, where you have to make sure that everybody is on the same rhythm on your IT. And we specialize in taking what is out there in the world of IT, making sure that our customers are cost effectively, because the customers we do work with are very cost sensitive, cost effectively bring in absolutely the minimum secured or security framework, what we often refer to. And we provide this, we bring it together, make sure they have those best practices in place. And normally what we find is that the challenges that people have, and if you also actually go and look at the historically and all the mainstream media breaches, 93% of all these issues that people are facing in regards to security or things going wrong in IT, data loss or whatever that might be, or ransomware protection or ransomware actual attacks, is that 93% of these breaches could have easily been avoided. And what we see out there is that these basic rules are often just broken. And what is cybersecurity essentially? Is cybersecurity is like building a wall of bricks, but you can't remove any of these basic bricks for the foundations. And then we can be, once we've built the wall and once we secure the sort of build these bricks up, then we can focus on more advanced like dark web monitoring or get all concerned or conscious about these things. And I think, so from our point of view, we provide like an insurance. We provide unlimited support to our customers, and ultimately we become like an insurance provider. And so if I partner with you as an organization, I need to make sure I bring in these best practices and provide this unlimited support or unlimited insurance to you, but I make sure that you have what we referred to earlier as the minimum required security framework. And none of these things, and which we can touch on in a second, actually really is very expensive.
Nice. So then what are they? What sort of things are you referring to that are these building blocks?
So one of the first building blocks are like, let's just talk about passwords. Like example would be like having your own username and password when you log onto your workstation. So we often see where there are workstation setups and people are changing or people are leaving the organization and they share a username and password to log onto the workstation. So what you want to make sure is that there is a proper password configuration of these desktops. And in our world of IT, which I don't want to go into too deep, we refer to as directory services, or a terminology you might have heard before is single sign-on. So it doesn't cost you anything extra to make sure it's implemented, and making sure that the username and the password that I use to log onto my laptop is the same as the username and password that I use to log onto, example, my emails or my files. And the benefit of this is the fact that if somebody had to leave your organization, you will not forget to actually switch off their access to, example, the files or the emails. And everything is in sync. If we change our passwords, everything is changing at the same time. These are obviously policies and guidelines that set out by the National Cybersecurity Center for us to implement. And just the fact that people sharing a username and password to log on to laptops or even email addresses is a big problem. And again, it's a simple change that's not going to cost you anything additional because you have the service in place already. And one of the other things that we often see is where organizations allow their staff to have full administrative access. So suddenly you as a business owner don't have visibility or control of what is actually being installed on these company assets or workstations, and anything might be on those workstations. And you want to have a form of, you don't want to go through the death by detail and make it impossible for people to actually work, but you want to have some sort of the administrative access on our sort of company workstations. One of the other very common basic problems that we often see is that people would use any workstation. They would log on from the family PC onto business critical files. And again, we're sitting in a situation we don't have proper visibility, or we allow a freelancer to bring in their own laptop to connect to business critical data. In those scenarios, we would recommend that obviously make sure that you buy a company asset or that if you are using any freelancers devices, that you actually bring in your security tools, and example, the password configuration, administrative rights, making sure that you have up-to-date antivirus installed on all of these workstations.
It's very sexy stuff, Isaac, and it sounds like the stuff that we don't get around to doing, right? Like it's really important. Like it's all the stuff that we are creating for the business is like held in all of these files and how we're working, but you don't really think about how you protect all of it, and particularly not normally until you get to a certain point. So it's as you say, it's the building blocks of the business being able to be not just work for you, but also to be protected against files being taken or attacks or whatever. So it's not sexy, but it is really important, right?
It's super important. If you just remove any of those, and some of the other examples would be, and we all heard it so many times, is like just making sure that you have security updates. Just make sure that you have critical security up to date. And we find often when we are actually going into companies that for years there hasn't been any security update. So this is again not going to cost you any additional money by making sure that you just have something as simple security updates. And it's free of charge from the vendor. Also making sure that you don't have any expired software on your computers. So like software that might have reached end of life, don't try and reverse engineer it. You are exposing yourself and making sure that all the software is always up to date. And again, it doesn't require a large budget.
Okay, nice. So let's talk about someone who's maybe at the very early stages of kind of needing to implement something like this. Like you're going from it maybe just being you and a business partner working together, and you're starting to work with, maybe you're starting to hire someone, or maybe you have got some virtual people who are working for you for a few hours a day. Like, how would you suggest people go about like moving that forwards? Like what are the steps to take to start to move this in the right direction?
Well, I think the key thing is that you need to actually, it all comes down to where's your emails, where are your files hosted, and then making sure that all the assets that are connecting to this cloud service, that most of us are using cloud services these days, it's properly configured and connected. So in the world of IT, again, we refer to Azure Active Directory, making sure that you have a professional edition, making sure that all your assets that are connecting to any business data are properly configured. We have security updates set up. We have an antivirus that we actually monitor, and that's actually up to date. That's another very common problem. We're buying the licenses, we have it installed, but we actually don't actually see if it's active, and actually we don't check whether it is up to date. The second thing I would really recommend is to make sure that you have multi-factor authentication set up on all these accounts. But again, you can't remove any of these blocks and think false impression of safety. Okay, I got multi-factor authentication. I do not have to worry about the fact that I'm using my family PC to log onto business critical data. So it's a combination of things that needs to get into rhythm, and making sure that all of these systems are properly connected, making sure that we have a password policy, multi-factor authentication, making sure that we have the security updates in place. And then another very common problem is, and just the final point on the previous one, is to make sure that we have antivirus installed, active on the actual workstation with the security updates. But another big issue is that often we are using cloud services, and we assume that the cloud would have some security, but the security is actually from the staging platform, the workstation that you are using to access these cloud services. And another problem is to go and check, do I have, as I'm building my cybersecurity network and my network up, making sure that I have got some sort of data retention in these cloud services. And do I need additional backups? Or do they offer any form of backups?
Oh gosh, it's just talking to you is making me realize how much you do for us, Isaac.
That's great. That's nice. That's
never leave me.
Yes, indeed.
And And I think so. Let me just put this into like the experience that I'm having on the other side of this is so when I first came to you, I think you're right, we were about 10 people, and we have grown since then. But so what it meant for us was that we have all these people working in these different countries. Some of them have their own laptops, some of them don't have their own laptops. But what we ended up doing was basically you guys have onboarded everyone's laptops onto like how you guys are working, but also that links together with how our infrastructure as a company is working to like our cloud services and where we're hosting files, etc. Probably using all the wrong words, Isaac, so you can correct me in a minute.
No, that's fine. You're forgiven. You are forgiven.
Something about Active Directory, I don't even know what that is really, but yeah, something that's very important, Active Directory. So all these different workstations, we have got them all onboarded so that you guys are essentially managing the workstation. So even if someone is working for us in the Philippines, and they're working on their own laptop, we are onboarding their laptop into our IT infrastructure. They are then getting their own access to, so we're using SharePoint. Maybe you can explain a bit more about SharePoint and Microsoft and all that stuff in a second, but that's how those are like the softwares that we are using to communicate. We're using their tools, sharing files. And then I guess for me, all this cybersecurity stuff is clearly really important, but until you've really experienced the downside, I think you can't really truly realize how important it is. I guess for me, the brilliance of it has been it's gone from someone working for me on the other side of the world saying they're having some kind of IT issue, and then I'm getting on the phone with them on Zoom trying to figure out what the problem is. I'm Googling it. We're trying to figure out what the solution is. I don't deal with that anymore. Now I'm just say, go and talk to Zhero, send a message, and they will come and figure out whatever this issue is for you. So basically took that whole IT headache away from me, because you guys can access all of these laptops, log on remotely, and troubleshoot any issues, right? And I think that for me, on like a practical day-to-day perspective as the business owner, it's fine when there's like you and a couple of others, but when you get to like 10 or 15, 20 people, you're like, I cannot deal with all these IT issues anymore. Like this is it's not a full-time job, but it's not far off it if it's a lot of stuff goes wrong at the same time.
That's right. I mean, that can be a problem. It becomes overwhelming, especially if things are going wrong. And one of the problems we obviously face is that, and it's not finger pointing, it's just a problem. Naturally, the business owner or the office manager is DIYing the IT. I'm not even sure that's a word, but they break fix the IT consistently, and they have an attitude of it will never happen to me, or something seriously bad will never really happen to us. And the problem is that, again, if we allow anybody to touch our sort of sensitive data, we coming into a compliance issue. So the terminology that we often refer to, insurance and compliance, are our assets that's accessing our business critical data compliant. And if you have a scenario where there are some sort of forensics and you don't have these basics in place, it can really be very problematic, regardless of the time and the effort it takes for you to DIY the IT yourself. But to make sure all these blocks or variables are running correctly can become complicated, especially if you start touching between 5 and 10 staff. And the other thing also, just on regards to, I just want to sort of answer your question on what do we need when we go through the journey, and we touch on a couple of subjects, but I think that is correct. I mean, you could, if a freelancer come and work for you, you want to make sure that you know what is installed. You want to make sure there's no auction or illegal pieces of software that's installed, and you want to make sure you're 100%. We're trying to reach the point of compliance. So we want to reach everybody is compliant on the security framework that we set out for our organization. And these are obviously the building blocks that we refer to, and making sure that we don't step or jump over any of those, and obviously avoiding any surprises.
And so I guess let's go back to real basics here, because I think some people listening will literally be trying to figure out how they even have their own calendar that they could share with someone, or even have their own email account, or how that works between multiple people. Is explaining maybe how that Microsoft system delivers that for small businesses? Could you give maybe some context on that?
So I think one of the things that we obviously see is often companies will start up and they might buy a service from 123 Reg or just out of the box, And normally this email services that comes with that is very, very limited, and it also has a major security concern. So by default, we would move our customers to a more sort of recognized platform that you can do more of the calendar sharing and also the task sharing and the whole functionality. And also this key thing for us is the security that you can bring into sort of fully integrated is either working on a platform like Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. Now, I think Microsoft 365 is definitely one of the key sort of market leaders. I don't like to always promote any specific vendor, but it's definitely a sort of security-wise and all the features it provides you and all the features in your day-to-day sort of operations and the integration with teams that you can optimize your operations is one of the key points just from where you start off as buying your domain and having a couple of email addresses on a 123 reg or one-on-one, actually migrating certain portions of your emails to a slightly better platform that's more geared up towards business. So that's one of the very key steps that you need to do is making sure. One of the key features that these platforms will provide you would be that your emails are stored centrally. So out of the box, normally the email service that comes with when you just buy a domain and you think you're starting this whole business is that it's normally actually not centralized and it's not always backed up properly. It's a very complicated configuration. So that's one of the words, professionalizing your sort of service level. You obviously don't want to work from a Gmail account and set yourself up as a proper brand. So that's just one of the first things we would recommend.
Nice. So getting that all, and then can you give us a bit of an overview, like choosing between like Microsoft or like Google Workspace, like how do people choose? Have you got any insights on that?
Well, I mean, Google is obviously very cost effective and it has a lot of features. So it's a very difficult debate to take on. I think Microsoft is definitely making it a lot easier for us from a point of view because majority of our customers are using a Windows workstation, so your integration is a lot better. I do know some of the tools that we are using, customers are using in Google, but eventually what we see, the pattern we are seeing is that people are eventually moving over to the world of the Microsoft 365. That's what they refer to today. I think if you're a small organization, you could get away, but the one thing you do not want to compromise on again is because we're using Google and we are not on Microsoft, is compromise on that integration that I referred to earlier, or the more technical term, Active Directory. You could do exactly the same with Google also. We've also been in scenarios where people has set up very complicated Google's spreadsheets. They're very popular for that. And it's simply virtually impossible for them to actually migrate over to 365 because some of the basic features, which I don't have all of it right in front of me right now, but some of the features are out of the box from Google actually very good for certain tasks that the people would like to do. I think if you reach a certain size, it is probably a decision you as a business owner need to make. But what we see, I can just say what we see out there in the market is that probably over 90% of our customers are on the Microsoft estate. And the other thing is, obviously, you need to build a system. Don't break the rules if you are using a Mac. A Mac needs to be integrated into these systems. It's a bit more challenging for us from a technical point of view, but do not have this false idea of Google or Mac needs to have different sort of behavior, or it can be treated differently. You need to apply these basic rules. Have your antivirus. We also, example, recommend for our customers to have a dedicated ransomware protection because antivirus by itself is not good enough. Again, going back to the Mac, you want to make sure that you have your security updates in place, you have the password policies in place, and so forth.
Okay, nice. And then what about passwords then? Let's talk. Actually, no, before you go on that one, just give us a ballpark idea, difference in price. Because clearly Google must be cheaper than Microsoft if people start there generally, or are they similarly priced?
I'm going to have to actually go and check it for you because it's consistently changing. If you allow me a little bit of time, I will go and check it for you. But I've actually done a full comparison on this before, and but I think it's a debate that will probably be ongoing. I think, look, some of the Microsoft features and the applications, but a lot of people like to download the applications. If you are happy to use the web-based applications from example Google or even Office Microsoft 365, that's also now available. It never used to be available many years back. So that was why Google was very popular. But allow me to go and check that for you. And as I don't have it right in front of me right now.
No worries. I've caught you unawares, Isaac, throwing all these detailed questions at you.
No, that's fine. Make it challenging. I like it. That's fine.
So talk about passwords then, because obviously there's lots of different password apps that you can use. What should people consider when they're deciding? Like, first of all, yeah, what is a password sharing app? How would you use it with your team? And what are some considerations there?
So I think basically I've referred to what we break it into, as I said to you, we have internally what we refer to as the minimum required security framework. And we were touching on the basics. And funny enough, as soon as we step out of that, we go to, I don't want to even call it advanced, but just standard things that we need to think about and have in place, and that will be a password vault. So when it comes to passwords, we really want, it's almost like 3 S's. It's like, how do we share our passwords, how we store our passwords, and how has it been set up? So sharing the password, you want to use a password vault, and how do you store it? Do you still use a post-it note to actually, do you write it down? Do you have it somewhere written on your phone? Or actually, do you have it on a post-it note? That will be wrong. So you want to find a way of, in your organization, that you have, first of all, you have, example, you build a system where directors have access to certain elements of passwords in our organization, and then you potentially decide on HR and operations. And you can obviously design it the way you would like, but you do want a form of how do we share it, how do we store it, and how is it set up?
And what sort of options are there out there in terms of, like, what systems can you use for this?
So currently there are a couple of systems. Actually, we're using a product called Passportal that is sort of integrated with our service offering. And there are one logon. There are a couple of one logon is also I can do what I can do at the end of this. I can do a comparison for us on the pricing for the different products, and maybe just share it in the link afterwards, and maybe just give you a couple of options with that.
Nice. Okay, cool. And so we just want something where we can basically have different people can have different access to the passwords, and so it's all stored in a secure place where passwords aren't flying around on unsecure messaging platforms.
That's right.
And but when should people start thinking about this, right? Because obviously some people listening to this will be very early days. There's still really a one man band or a business partnership or something. When should people start thinking about this, and where should they start?
Well, I mean, one of the first things is, if I'm a one-man band, I will probably just make sure that I do have, example, I'll set up another account in, example, I don't want to, again, favor any specific vendor or anything, but let's say Dropbox, for example, and I will just drag very important files from there from time to time. Now, it needs to be a managed service also. It needs to be checked. When I copied that file from A to B, did it actually move? So like the example of the organization that were taking planes apart and boxing everything up, is the backup actually running? This is another problem. We're paying for the service, but is somebody actually managing these backups? So inspecting, asking for a restore. So if you have such service from an organization, ask them, can you restore the files, and can we actually test it and have a regular disaster recovery sort of plan? Now, if I'm a one-man band, I will probably just make sure that I have very critical files stored in different medium, and making sure that I use, example, on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, just make sure that I move some files that are critical for my organization to another platform. And you could use a USB hard drive. The problem, again, comes in with compliance, and the problem with compliance is not necessarily the problem with losing the data or being encrypted. The problem is the penalties you're facing potentially with ICO. And that's the whole GDPR problem. So again, having a moving part of a USB hard drive floating around might get lost. Make sure it's encrypted, make sure it's password protected. So there are quite a lot of moving parts. What we are doing for our customers are, we have a cloud service that we provide, and we're making sure that we back up these files for the customers. A lot of our customers also have additional backups on Microsoft 365, and that's becoming sort of a standard these days, making sure you have additional backups for your emails as well as your files.
My God, Izak, it's like really blowing my mind how much there is to think about, and it's making me really glad to have you. Because I'm basically taking so much of this for granted, and obviously there's the like usability of how your business runs, but there's obviously so many more reasons for all of that is beyond just the business working well and what can go wrong. So like, you also have a book, I believe, Izak. You're also an Amazon #1 best-selling author. So the Amazon #1 bestsellers are here together in the virtual room. Tell us about your book and how people can get a copy.
Well, thank you very much. Yes. So, I mean, the key thing is the book is very much just on touching on the subject that we sort of refer to here. And the title of the book is actually, You Do Not Need a £1 million cybersecurity budget. Basically just referring to stick to the basics. We can worry about the more important, or I don't want to say more important, but we can worry about the rest of the features later. Let's just stick to the basics, not break the basic rules. And we're also touching in the book on keeping it simple, stick to the basics. What do we see out there in the world of IT? We're touching on cyber essentials, AI, insurance and risk, and also just a couple of things that you need to have in place when you are working from home.
Really nice. And I think you're going to share a link with us off the back of today's session. We'll share with the readers in the show and listeners in the show notes, and they can get a special discounted copy off the back of today's recording.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we make it available at a 90% ebook that will be available at zhero.co.uk/property strategy, or just PS, and the discount code will be PS, and you just type it in there and you'll get a 90% discount. You can buy it directly off our website. And thank you very much for that.
Really nice. And if people are wanting to consider working with you guys, like how you help people, what sort of size businesses are you there to support? Like how many team members does someone need to help for someone to really come and benefit from working with you?
Well, I mean, the key, they can just contact me directly, just on my email address, io@zhero.co.uk, and just drop me an email. I'm happy to also provide free sort of just assistance, guidance, and direct the people if they're still a small organization, just making sure they have the right things in place. And as I said to you, none of these items are really very expensive. It's just a couple of basic things you want to make sure is in place.
Nice. And then when someone's really getting towards like maybe 5 people in the team, 5 to 10 people, that's when it's really starts to become really valuable how you can support, right?
That's right. Yes. More than happy to help, more than happy to also have a look and provide just a general review.
It's really amazing. I think it's such a great practical episode to get us thinking about something that I think is not really talked about much in our industry, in the property industry, and good to get your perspective on it, and also to just illuminate a solution. Like for us, as you know, we're big travel fans. All of our team are remote. Yes. We don't want to be tied to one office all the time, and for that to work for us and to work in a way that we're actually protected as well from a lot of these threats that you're talking about is really only possible because of the work that we've done with you. So of course people can go and do it in different ways, but from our experience, we've been working with Izak for sort of 5 years now, and you guys take care of all of this stuff for me, which is why I'm not even really aware of a lot of it. It's just kind of happening, which is kind of what I want, right? Like it's not my skill set. I don't really know about this stuff, but it's a really important part of your business. So to be able to have someone who you can just have supporting you on that side of it, so we can just focus on doing the deals, that's what it's all about.
Excellent. Just a final note that I just want to leave with you that we really still see often, Jackie, if it's okay, is that we still see people being emailed or transferring money into wrong bank accounts. And very similar to the passwords, we recommend that there's a two-step sort of authentication. And it is when somebody emails change your bank account details, double check with that person. Did you send this email? Do you need me to change the passwords? Because what they do is they intercept your emails, and we still sadly see literally hundreds of thousands of pounds being paid into wrong accounts up until today.
Gosh, yeah, that's a really good point. To just that double check in place to make sure that you're double checking with the right person. Yeah, really nice.
So it's almost like the two-factor authentication that we talk about in our passwords. Make sure in your daily sort of operations. The other thing you also want to make sure is when somebody leaves your organization, go and reflect, where did they have access to? Do they still have access to my accounting software? Do they still have access to my project management software? And make sure that it's actually locked down properly.
Yeah, you're right. So it's not just the onboarding process for new team members coming in, but also that exit process too.
That's right.
Yeah, really nice. So what's your main takeaway that you want to leave people with today, Izak? Your final thought?
Well, I think if we reflect on the whole drama that the company with the planes have almost sort of had, is that make sure you can recover from everything, but make sure you have backups in place.
Well, when I told you we were going super practical today, I didn't lie, did I? So yeah, it's not what we all love doing, but it's super important, and you've got to make sure you've got it covered, to make sure you've got the downsides covered, but also to mean that you can have freedom. And there's a lot of structure that is behind the scenes to truly allowing freedom. So either get your teeth stuck in to some of the themes that Izak spoke about today. There's a few follow-up pieces of research that are in the show notes if you want to get access to those. Or if you're like me and you just don't want to deal with IT and you want to talk to someone that can sort all of that headache out for you, then do reach out to Izak. His contact details are also in the show notes, and his company is Zhero, but that is Zhero, not the accounting software Xero. So very important, Zhero, Zhero. Reach out to Izak if you want to find out more about what he does and how he can support your growing business. So this time next week, we are circling back around to from the practical to the much more ethereal. We're talking about heart-led decision making next week and balancing the head and the heart when it comes to investing in property. So until then, have a great week ahead.